Hello, my name's Andy Tidy and welcome back to another very wintry edition of Canal Hunter. Now, if you look around me today, you'll see it's blowing an absolute blizzard. Not the ideal day for filming a Canal Hunter episode. I think I hear you cry. Well, as you'll have probably noticed, most of my Canal Hunter videos are filmed when the weather's good. I take my chances when I can get them. But of course in the winter time, that's not always the case. So today I'm doing something slightly different. I'd like to show you some of the resource materials that I use when I make these videos. And there's no way that I can do that standing out here in the snow. So let me welcome you in. Now up front, I think I need to make some acknowledgements. Because you see, whilst I front up these videos and I also do all the production work on them, the actual research and the resource materials that go into them has increasingly become something of a team effort. And whilst it's probably wrong to single out individuals, there are some individuals who have made an outstanding contribution to my collection of old BCN material. First up, I'd like to thank Duncan Moore. Duncan in some ways has been the powerhouse behind the collection of old archive images which are found scattered all the way across the internet. And between Duncan and myself over the summer of 2020, pulled together, catalogued and ordered many of the old photos which you've been enjoying. To bring the photographic record slightly more up to date, I'm also massively indebted to Hugh Potter. Hugh collected a huge collection of black and white and colour images from the 1970s, and he's very gladly allowed me to share them so that you can get a better insight into how the canals used to look. You see, I got to know the Birmingham Canal navigations when I was about 8, 9 or 10. My father was a keen boater and we used to regularly take summer holidays on canal boats which took us across the Birmingham plateau. Back at that age, I remember a sense of the smell and the noise and the atmosphere of the BCN, but I remember very few specific images. And that's where Hugh's photographic collection has come in absolutely invaluable. He hits exactly the right time spot when I was travelling on the waterways. So over the last year or so, my atmospheric recollections have fused with Hugh's photographic collection. And that forms the backbone of so much of what you've been seeing over the last few months. But it's not only Hugh. Brenda Ward of the Birmingham Canal Navigation Society and Kev Maslin, they all supply photographs which have helped move these projects forwards. But what about the source documentation? Because I know so many of you watch these videos and you'll run the National Library of Scotland's side-by-side maps alongside it, and often these 20-minute videos span out to 40 minutes or more as you examine the route as we go along. So on this dismal winter's morning, I thought I would show you the main resource materials which I turn to time and again. I'm not quite sure when you're going to get to see this video. It may be right at the end of the series, or if weather prevents me getting out onto the towpaths, I might slot it in sooner as a filler. But anyhow, I thought it would be a worthwhile exercise. So let me introduce you to my main resource materials, and if they inspire you, maybe you can invest some of your Christmas present money by buying some for yourself. So let's take a look. Now I know I've got a lot of international viewers, especially from the United States, and it's great to have you on board. And of course, you'll all know where England is. But where exactly is the BCN, the Birmingham Canal Navigations, which I keep banging on about? Well, let me show you on a map. Basically, the Birmingham Canal navigations are the very epicentre of the UK canal network. There couldn't be anywhere further from the sea. And the Birmingham Canal navigations are a distinct area of industrial canals which sit on a sandy plateau. Not the ideal place for a canal network, but there was coal and there was ironstone, there was limestone and there was clay. All the vital ingredients for the Industrial Revolution. So a small lack of water, well, is that going to put off the Industrial Revolution pioneers? I think not. So if you want to find Birmingham, which is the UK's second largest city, it is bang in the middle of England. And even a cursory glance at a map covering all the inland waterways of England reveals the BCN as something of a tangled labyrinth, very difficult to get your head around. Even seasoned boaters who are familiar with the main route across from Wolverhampton to Birmingham will have very little idea about how all the rest, the other 100 miles of existing canals, connect together. And one husband and wife team who were struggling to get their heads around the complexities of the BCN are another vlog channel, Minimalist. And Joe spent a long time putting together a London Underground style version of the BCN. And whilst it comes with all of the problems associated with a London Underground electrical circuit style map, it does at least show you a basic framework that you can grasp in one glance. But having kind of got your head around the structure of the BCN, you really need to be able to look at it in a proper geographic sense so you can really appreciate the distances and the curves that take the canal from one place to another. And taking your understanding of the BCN to that next level, I would suggest you get hold of a copy of the Heron BCN map. It's a great map, it shows all the canals connected, and the canals are the main element of the map, although you can see the rest of the city in context. Now, the Heron maps do come with a disadvantage in that the maps are printed on both sides, so you get the northern section on one side and the southern on another. But the section I've got on display covers the northern bit, the Worley and Essington, the Cannock extension, the Doe End. But if, like me, you are just not satisfied with exploring the existing 100 miles of the BCN and you want to go further back in history to know what used to exist, then I would suggest that the first starting place is the map at the very centre of Richard Dean's The Other 60 Miles. This is a very dated book written in the 1970s, when Richard produced a gazetteer of all the lost sections, where they were and what you could expect to find. But in the centre of his book there is the reference map showing you where all the pages and the subsidiary bits can be found. And again, at a glance, it provides you with a quick oversight of the shape of the BCN as it used to be. But it won't satisfy you for long. And when you want to go deeper and understand the lost sections of the BCN in the context of its surrounding, you're going to need yet another map. And for this one, I introduce you to another Richard. This one is Richard Dean and his historical map of the Birmingham canals. Richard's map is absolutely fabulous. The one that I'm showing you is my third version that I've bought. And in this day of technology, I still keep going back to this paper map. Now, my problem with it is the level of detail contained inside it is so great that you can't really read it at standard magnification. So my practice tends to be to use it, but then to take a photograph of the little section I want to work on and then print it so that I can actually read all of the glorious detail that he's included. You'll find not only are there the canals, there are the colliery tramways, there is a little C for every colliery and pithead that used to exist, and I think every known basin on the BCN has been included. And where Richard has found the map too complicated to fit onto the major scale, he then blows it up and goes even more into detail in the tangled knot of lost canals around Tipton and West Bromwich. But one word of warning about using Richard Dean's map. In some ways, I would describe it as the map of the BCN as it never was. Because you see, the BCN, it was an evolutionary network, and Richard's map covers every lost section throughout its entire timescale. That means some of the early branches, like the Dumaresque branch, had actually been abandoned before some of the big later canals were built. And I'm thinking here of things like the Tame Valley and the Cannock extension. Nonetheless, Richard Dean's historical map of the BCN is the go-to source for mapping of the old Birmingham Canal Navigations network. Of course, searching for the old BCN canals is a seductive process. You get sucked into Richard's maps, but it's not long before you want to go even deeper into seeing what the surrounding areas contained. And for that, going back to the early Ordnance survey maps is the key. There is a set of OS maps which were produced around 1900, and these show in fantastic detail how the canals looked and what surrounded them. Now, when I started out on this exploration, there wasn't the online material that there is today. So I started off using the Godfrey OS edition maps, which were a paper-based version of these OS maps, and they covered an area of about 1.5 miles across by 1 mile high. And when you assembled these as a matrix and you stood back, you could see the line of both the current and the lost canals. Problem was, it's all in black and white. So I resorted to my handy marker pen and coloured all the canals in an optimistic light blue. And it's these maps that I often turn to when I give my guided walks out in the field. And you'll often find me with all my maps spread out across the floor in front of the bar, getting into everyone's way, but giving everyone an overview of just how amazingly complicated this network of archaic canals really was. Now, as I said, since I worked from these paper-based maps, things have come on a long way in terms of technology. You've got online mapping that you can use from your mobile phone, but probably the best source of online maps is using the National Library of Scotland's side-by-side mapping system. And on that, you set your maps to the 1900 OS version, and alongside it, you've got either a map or, for my preference, a satellite image of exactly the same location. And as your cursor runs across the line on the old maps, it shows you on the new modern aerial photos exactly where you're going. And from that, you can get a very good idea of where you're likely to find some remains, and also how you can get access without getting slung off for trespass. Now, I have to admit that the online version, for all of its wonderful accuracy, also means you lose a little bit of the excitement of discovering something you didn't realise existed. But nonetheless, I would have to say that when you watch these videos, if you can bring on the National Library of Scotland's side-by-side maps, it massively enhances your experience. But of course, it does mean that these 20-minute videos soon become 40. Now, whilst the National Library of Scotland's online service does provide a satellite image, for some reason it's not as clear and not as detailed as going in for Google Earth. So if you are going to put your boots on and go and explore, I sometimes find it's better to get onto the Google Earth imagery, and that way you can get much closer to the action. You can also, of course, drop that little yellow man into the field gates and see whether it's a feasible way for you to gain access. So that completes my roundup of the basic maps that I use. But of course, if you want to learn more about the BCN's history, you have to start to dive into the literature. And the place that I would suggest you start is by getting a copy of Richard Chester Browne's The Other 60 Miles. It's the one that I showed you with the overall map of the lost canals in the centre. It's dated and it has its limitations, but it's the place where I started my hunt for understanding the BCN in its entirety. And as the next port of call after The Other 60 Miles, which is simply a mapping exercise, I would introduce you to the Birmingham Canal Navigations, Volume 1, 1768 to 1846 by a Mr. S.R. Broadbridge. That sounds like a cumbersome tome, and in a way it is, and yet it's the one book which captures the vital expansion era of the BCN in fabulous detail, and really it's the primary resource for much of my research. It covers the construction of the original Birmingham Canal, its extension through to Watery, the acquisition of the Worley and Essington Canal and the Dudley Canal, and then the maintenance and the extension through the Tame Valley. It's believed that Mr. Broadbridge had every intention of producing a sequel which would continue the story of the BCN through to the present day. Sadly, he never got to write it, so that glimpse into BCN history is forever lost to us. Of course, this S.R. Broadbridge book is long out of print, but do a Google search and I'm sure you'll find a copy on eBay or Amazon. As far as getting a copy of The Other 60 Miles, you could probably get one on the internet, but I do know that the Birmingham Canal Navigation Society have a small supply left on their stall. Now, to take ourselves a little bit more up to date, I will introduce you to the Inland Waterways Association's Blue Book. In fact, it's the cruising and walking guide to the BCN. It's an in-house production. It kind of has a feel that it was rolled off on a Roneo printer. There are even some pages where they got misprinted and they've gummed them together to make the sequence right. It's all held together with a spine. And possibly most frustratingly, it's all produced in black and white, so telling the difference between a canal and a road can be challenging. But if you look online and find yourself a copy, with a bit of luck, someone has gone through with a blue crayon and crayoned all the canals in for you. I got mine for about £15. And as well as showing you the maps, it also gives you this commentary and historical overview. It tells you about the geology and the history, very much at the level of history that fascinates me. But a word of warning about that. The maps are done in this slightly strange linear fashion, so they all go in a straight line. There are no bends on their BCN. And if you can't find a hard copy, there are a number of soft copies around, and I'm sure you can access one. And if necessary, print off the relevant pages that you're going to be looking at. If you're looking for a technical version of the BCN, the furlongs and the miles and the locks, Charles Hadfield's Canals of the West Midlands is a really good source. But if you like your history deep, thorough and accurate, then anything that you can grab by Ray Shill is the place to go. The Birmingham Canal Navigations and the Canalside Industries of the BCN are the two books that I go to all the time. Ray is a real historian, as opposed to me, who is a geographer with an interest in the history. But Ray will go into dates and names and places at a level that I could never even hope to achieve. So anything by Ray Shill is fab. And Ray's writings are not confined to his books. He also routinely adds sections into the BCN boundary post. That's the Birmingham Canal Navigation's magazine. That's also a fascinating place to gain historical insights, and many of the stories which I've shared with you over the last weeks have come from the pages of the boundary post. Now, a lot of you have wanted to spend a bit longer dwelling on the photographs I've used. Well, the photographs that we have assembled from around the internet, we're not hoarding them and keeping them to ourselves. We have located them on my associated blog site, Captain Ahab's Watery Tales. And on there you'll find there is a tab for the lost sections of the BCN. And from there you can navigate yourself through to all the various areas of the BCN. And within each of those blog posts there is an ever-growing collection of archived photographs. Most of them we've tried to lay out in sequence so that you can tell from one end of the canal how it used to look. So if you want to go and to just quietly work your way through a particular canal bit by bit, go and have a look at my website. A Google search will take you there. And one of the last, but certainly not the least source of information and stories come from the comments which are left both on my Canal Hunter videos and also within my blog. People who remember the area come onto the site and they jot down their recollections and add them in as a comment, and in so doing they add to the historical record. So if you're watching this and you do have recollections of these old canals and the surroundings, feel free to add those comments in, because that means they are then captured forever and we can be sharing them around in the years to come. I particularly like some of the comments that have been made from the area around Heron and Leamore. These are the difficult areas from the boater's perspective, areas where you sometimes get trouble from the bank. And I love it when you hear stories of a young lad going out with his dad, and one of his favourite hobbies was to lob bricks off a bridge to try and splash the blokes on the back of the coal boats. I don't suppose the blokes on the back of the coal boats were quite as enthusiastic. Nor were they enthusiastic about the others who jump onto the boat and nick a bag full of coal for the grate. So thank you so much for joining me in these videos as we explore the current and the historical canals of this fascinating region. It's been an absolute delight to see so many people subscribing to the channel. It's about 2,000 subscribers now, and I'm regularly getting about 20,000 views every month. It's not the viewer numbers that really count. For me, it's sharing the history, sharing the knowledge of what used to go before. Because if we don't understand what went before, how can we really understand our place going into the future? So, I hope you've enjoyed this overview of my resource materials that I use for making the Canal Hunter videos. Hopefully you've got some ideas of ones that you'd like to get for yourself. And I would encourage you to leave comments and insights where appropriate. So thank you so much for joining me. It's a joy to make these videos, and I will see you out on the canal in 2021, I hope.